The market took an absolute massive Viagra pill last week. Last week we saw a almost 3% gain on the week. We go to the daily, we can see most of that came from one day. We saw almost a 3% day for SPY or ES, right? So absolute insane move here. And that happened right after hitting our minimum target, right? So the minimum target got hit. Now, I guess the question now is this the bottom for the market, or will we push down to 603 to possibly 560, 570? Okay, so we were already expecting a massive push higher last week just because we were super oversold, right? I mean, if you go to the daily time frame before you had that massive push higher, you can see we had a pretty big gap right here in between this moving average, between this EMA. I believe that is the 10 EMA. So the 10 EMA was really far from the current price, which means we were extended, meaning we needed a push higher. And on every single push down, you can see we had a very, very sharp rally to the upside. Now, that very sharp rally to the upside, I think happened already, to be honest. I think we might go up a little bit more, but I do not think this is the bottom just because the war, the macro, has not been fixed. Okay, the war is still happening. It's still escalating. Iran shot down now 2 United States planes, and now they had to sit there and rescue those people that they shot down. So I know Trump wants to say this war is ending soon, but now when Iran is literally shooting down our planes, it doesn't look like it's going to end soon. Now, do I think Trump needs to end it soon? Absolutely. I don't think this is good for us at all. But now, will he? No, I do not think so. I do not think Iran's going to end it at all anytime soon. And there has not been any deals being made, right? So just because we had, a Viagra week for the market doesn't mean the bottom is in. And actually, this is usually a red flag because this is exactly what happens on every single pullback, right? Not even just for here, but like if we go back down to 2022, right? 2022 did the same exact thing, right? We do have massive push higher during this correction that we had. So I do expect more. I do expect the same thing for SPY here. We may push higher. We may push up here to top EMA, right? We could even push up to freaking 683 before we fold over again. I do expect another push higher, right? Now, I don't really expect many movements above 668. However, we could see a little bit higher as long as we don't make a new all-time high. We're good. So overall, I do think this week is going to be short term, and we will fold back down to the downside. I think that's what's most likely going to happen, and we're probably going to see 604 next. But until Trump ends this war and oil goes back down, there's still more downside to happen, right? So that's the overall market. That is by again, ES, the same thing. Right now, in after hours, market is slightly green. We were kind of bouncing off of this bottom EMA, which I believe is the 10. So the 10 EMA is holding as supports right now, and we're kind of squeezing between the 10 and the 21, which could push us to the 50. So we'll definitely watch that this week. But what I think right now is good for the markets is probably be looking for some short-term longs, maybe some option plays, look for some undercuts, look for some sweeps, look for some long positions to target this 50 EMA for SPY. I think that is probably going to be the play this week. But we'll have to see Monday open and see where the market is really going to open at and head, because Trump can speak from now into open and change everything, right? So that's the real market. Let's look at Bitcoin now. Bitcoin, this is still bearish. We did break to the downside. We've been chopping at this breakout level, but we are still rejecting and respecting this bearish triangle correction, okay? So I still think Bitcoin is bearish, and we will push back down to at least 60K, but most likely 49K is probably where we're going to most likely head to. And right now, what I'm watching is shorts on crypto stocks. We are taking out this high while rejecting the trend line. I do want to see some short plays happen on some crypto stocks. And actually, while we're talking about that, that's basically it for crypto. But let's go actually look at some crypto stocks and see what this looks like going into this week. Coinbase, I don't really see much here. We could bounce higher, but I don't see much here for shorts. So Coinbase, there's not really any short opportunities. MSTR, Nope, only a long opportunity actually. Actually, a pretty good long opportunity, but we have not hit the main target for this wedge breakdown, so the odds of us actually bouncing here are much lower. Even though we are sweeping out these major lows, right? We're holding a support. You know, if crypto very well might push up a little bit more, right? We could actually go up and reject this trend line more. So I mean, that could technically show a bounce, but just because we have not hit the bottom of this wedge breakout means the main target has not been hit yet. So I mean, the bottom isn't in. So taking longs here is a little bit risky. So probably wouldn't be doing that. Hood is the same thing. I don't see anything for shorts on Hood. So right now, crypto stocks doesn't really show anything. We're going to have to wait for Monday open. You know, if Hood does decide to go higher and we, you know, reject this high or reject this EMA, then we can look at some shorts. Same thing for MSTR. If we go up, reject these highs at 130, possibly these EMAs, then we can look for shorts. Coinbase, if we take out this high and reject around 179, then we can look for shorts. But until then, crypto doesn't really look like crypto stocks. Doesn't look like it's a good short. Bitcoin does. Now, just because the crypto stock does not look good for shorts doesn't mean you can't take them. You could take Coinbase shorts if the Bitcoin chart looks amazing for shorts, just as a bet on Bitcoin, right? That is, you could do that. However, I still would like to have the crypto stocks to be good for shorts too, right? It just has better odds. It's more safe, right? Versus just taking Coinbase short, so you know the setup's not really there, just because Bitcoin setup's there, and which it will play out. I mean, I would imagine that you'll still make money if Bitcoin is bearish, just because this will go down, obviously. So, you know, it's still something that you could do, but ideally, in an ideal world, I would want both setups to match. So, if that happens, I'll definitely be looking for shorts on crypto related stocks like Coinbase, MSTR, Hood this upcoming week. But until then, we'll see when the time comes, and I'll load it out in the chart program. So that's basically that. Now let's look at before we get to next Fibonacci, let's review some of the macro related sectors. So the dollar absolutely bounced off this EMA, bounced off this wedge breakout. We go to the daily. We are holding this as a retest. So this is definitely not bearish at all. We will most likely make new highs. You know, we did take out a major high here at 100, but I do think we can go higher. You know, we could push to above 101, almost 102, could push to 104. I mean, I am definitely bullish for the intermediate term to possibly long term. So I do expect higher for the dollar, which is not good for the market. So overall, this is definitely not bearish at all. You know, I haven't looked at this indicator in a long time. So 35% of U.S. stocks are below their 50-day moving average. Okay, so above their 50-day moving average. So that means, yeah. So that is a lot of stocks that are, you know, pretty cheap right now, right? And you can kind of see when this indicator goes really low like this, that means the market is going to bottom soon, right? So we are low, but there is room for more downside, right? So although we are pretty low here, we can definitely go much lower right now. Again, with that short-term bottom, you know, this could push higher to like 50, right? And then the market rolls over again and still would be bearish. So this doesn't tell too much. It just means that, you know, we're definitely oversold, and we could definitely push a little bit higher short term. So, and I still continue to believe that thesis until we end up hitting some type of resistance, which again was these EMAs, right? So we just need to go higher to see those EMAs. Yields. Now, yields did reject this trend line as planned. You know, that's what was expected. And now we're holding these EMAs. We had a gap up today. You know, this could go for a breakout now. You know, because we are holding this EMA, right? We could go for a breakout now, and that's completely fine. And actually, I would prefer that, right? I make more money doing that. But however, we have not actually seen the higher low zone, right? Which is almost near the 50 EMA. So for yields, I want to see a push lower, ideally to this green zone, and then a bounce, and then we go higher for a breakout, and then we'll push up to 5% for the yields, right? Which, for those who don't know, when yields go higher, that means bonds crash. So this is a short on bonds, right? And I've already been in shorts. We were up, I think, 71% at the peak, maybe more. So we added to our position when we actually started bouncing at these EMAs. So I definitely want to break, but you know, if we want to go to the green zone, I'm completely fine with that. And actually, I do expect that to play out more likely. A bounce up this green zone, and then we'll push higher. So, and then TLT is the ticker that I'm shorting, right? So whenever this breaks the downside, once we lose this trend line, then I think this is going to absolutely move really, really fast, and things are going to get out of control, right? Because once we break the trend line, all the liquidity is going to be showing short, and we're going to see $74 for bonds, which is absolutely insane, right? That is very bad, right? So, if someone's trying to look for a new entry, I would definitely wait for a breakout, maybe even a retest, and once we do get that, then end up shorting, because that's when the move is going to really happen, is when after we get that breakout, and then we'll absolutely dump down to $74, $75. Okay, so that's if you're trying to get a new entry, but that's basically my short on bonds right now. That's definitely not good for the market at all. IWM chart, same thing. I definitely expect some short-term pushes higher, but just because we were bouncing off this EMA, but overall we still rejected this red zone. So I think this is also going to be short-lived, and we're going to go lower, of course. So, but that's basically it. Let me go over the Mag 7 really fast. So Tesla is down 5% Friday, which was absolutely nasty. If you go to the daily, we could justify and say that this is still inside this wedge. If we just do some manipulation like that, just move it back down, right? And it's still technically valid, right? So, we haven't really had any breakouts to the upside or downside for Tesla. It's still just consolidating since the start of 2026, which is absolutely insane. Really since, start of January, middle of January. So Tesla absolutely just been bleeding, but very slowly in a choppy formation. So, I think we could have a short-term pop higher. We could, doesn't mean we will, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do. But it's definitely not something I'd be taking longs on at all. But if we do, that's completely expected. We'll probably see 453, and then we can see it push lower to around 225. Possibly if we want to go really deep in 150s. But 225, 230, 252 are both really good levels to watch. So Tesla overall is bearish. Amazon rejecting these EMAs, I think bearish. We could push higher to possibly 234 to reject this retest level, since we don't have one, which very well might play out, right? And then we would reject that and then push lower to 135, right? So overall, pretty bearish on Amazon longer term, or in intermediate term. But short term, we could push higher still, or we could fade. We're still rejecting these EMAs. I can see either or. But if we do go up higher and start rejecting these EMAs or retest level even more, then then we can look for a short opportunity, right? But until then, right now is just kind of more bearish. Definitely not buying here. Nvidia broke to the downside of this wedge. Again, we are holding this EMA, but it's going to be the same thing almost for all these Max 7s. It's just we're holding these EMAs, going to push a little higher for resistance, and then we're going to flow back down. Nvidia's minimum target is $86, but we'll most likely push way lower than that. But these are the buy zones. We have not even hit those yet, so Nvidia can definitely go much lower. Microsoft's the only Mag 7 that's actually discounted, and it kind of looks good for like a long-term buy. That's just like a small long-term add position here. But I do believe we go lower, right? But short term, we are definitely oversold. We can definitely bounce back to at least these EMAs. Apple bouncing at this 50 EMA. However, I still think, again, it's short-term lived. We will push lower. 219 minimum, but I think we do push lower, much lower. So we'll see. We had that manipulation leg. I do not see us going above that manipulation leg at all. So we'll see how this plays out, but overall still bearish. Google, same thing, rejecting CMAs. Oh, but we actually haven't even reached the EMA yet. So we are rejecting this EMA. We could push higher for this retest at around 328. However, it's still bearish, so nothing bullish about that at all. Same thing with Meta. Meta is pretty oversold. We could push higher for its retest at 638 and to these EMAs. However, it is still pretty bearish. So definitely not looking good for longs, maybe on a smaller time frame, but on the weekly, definitely not good for longs here. Most likely we can push much, much lower. So basically what we have seen with this massive rally that we had last week is that this is going to be short-term lived. The market is going to fall back down. We may go higher for like half of this upcoming week, or maybe all week. We may even see this entire week that's coming up. We may see a massive rally, and we may actually continue for more upside short term. or we could just have a middle of the week sell off and then we just dump for the rest of the week, which I think is probably what's going to happen. But who knows? We'll have to see. We're not at the resistance right now yet. We're actually bouncing at the EMAs. So until we get that resistance, then we can really tell, which I'm going to assume most likely is going to happen near the middle of this week. Could happen at the end. Could happen next week. We'll have to see. But yeah, so overall, I do think this is short-term lived and we're going much lower. Now let's look at some individual names. CVI, our old position that we alerted out to all of y'all. We alerted that out the very start of this week right here on March 2nd, around $25. But this has absolutely been soaring. We did hit my purple zone. We hit 35, 36, and rejected. My purple zone really ended at like 33, but there's also a fair value up here, which is where we went. So absolutely rejected resistance. Perfect rejection too, and the leading diagonal in a very smaller, much smaller time frame. That's probably like in the 4 hour, but there is a leading diagonal here that I actually just saw as I'm talking. But leading diagonal here going into that purple zone, definitely bearish. Nothing bullish about that. So I think we do pull back for CVI. Maybe we could bounce out this EMA here, 21, which we're at right now. Or we could pull back to the 50. I think most likely we'll pull back to the 50 and then start bouncing, right? Which will give the market one more little small push into that resistance level before we roll over, right? So I think we can bounce out that EMA, and then we'll start seeing $50 a share for CVI. So overall, short-term bearish, long-term bullish here, intermediate-term bullish here. I'm still holding. I definitely trimmed a lot here. Not a lot, but I trimmed some here. I hold more than half. I think I hold like 75% of my original position. Maybe I do only hold half. I'm not really sure. I'll have to look at it again, but I still hold a lot. So I do believe we still will push higher. I just think we need to go back to these EMAs. So we were extended, right? We were really far from these EMAs, right? Because from 34.82, and then the EMAs is at $29, right? So we were pretty extended. So a pullback was going to happen. This is now what would call the higher low, where we bounced the buy zone. We broke above the key level, we hit the purple zone, and now we form the higher low, right? This is kind of how the normal standard procedure happens when the stock is kind of bouncing and pushing higher for their wave, right? So overall, still really bullish on this name, still hold my shares, right? Nimbus is a different one. We are holding that retest level, like amazing close for that week. Amazing close. You cannot get a better close for Nimbus last week. If you're looking for longs, that was the candle that you were looking for. You can literally not get better. Okay, we held the EMAs for support. We held that retest level. We broke out of this falling wedge. We held the green zone. We don't have anything bearish on our side, so we're going to push up to 172, 173, 175 if the market allows it to. Minimum target of 141. Definitely a huge take profit level at 141, and then the red zone would be another huge take profit level, right? So overall, will Nimbus see the red zone? That's really hard to say just because of the overall market state. If the market does push higher and Nimbus goes absolutely nuts, then I think it can happen. I think Nimbus could see that red zone. But if the market starts crashing freaking tomorrow at open, then it's not going to see that, obviously. So I don't see the market going up too much higher, which wouldn't really support this seeing the red zone. Maybe at least the minimum target, but the red zone in this market for SPY, that is stretching it. It is stretching it. It can happen. We have earnings here in how many days is that? It's like a month, 24 days. Yes, a little bit less than a month. And that could send us have a massive gap up to that red zone. That's definitely possible too. But overall, I still think this will go higher. It's hard to say, intermediate term we'll see the red zone just because we have to see the market first. But as of right now, we will for sure go higher for Nimbus, right? So right now, bullish for Nimbus, but time-wise, length-wise, when we see red zone, we see the minimum target. We'll have to just play it by ear with the market. But right now, we are bullish for Nimbus. So Nimbus is definitely a buy. But that's basically everything else going over the market. If there's any